Hey there YouTube, it's me, Broken Terrain, coming to you with another crafting video. I'm going to do these modular cliffs that you can see in the video here, and what's even better is they flip over to show cave tiles. So let me hit you with that drop and then we'll start. To prepare to make these cliffs, I had purchased some 1-inch XPS foam and I had glued two 2 by 2 foot pieces together. These two pieces have dried for several days and now I'm cutting them in half. I'm going to use half of this for another project and half of it for this project here. When cutting XPS foam like this, make sure you take your time each pass, driving the knife a little farther down, letting the knife and the tool do most of the work. And if you're patient, you're going to get a nice square edge. Here I have a single piece of the 1-inch XPS foam. And that's because I want two size cliffs. I want a 3-inch tall and a 2-inch tall cliff. So I'm going to cut a 12-inch by 12-inch square and glue it to the other sheet. As was with our last cut, take it slowly, be patient, make sure you hold that blade perpendicular to the materials so you get a nice, clean, straight cut. Fantastic. Now it's time to glue the pieces together. You can see I've already got the two pre-glued pieces, and I'll show you how I did that with this one here. I take out my Eileen's tacky glue and I spread a generous amount across the smaller piece. I had a hard time squeezing it out, so I took the top off. That helped. And then I got a popsicle stick or a tongue depressor and just smeared it about, gave the surface of the foam a nice even coat. Oh, looks like I needed a little more glue. It looks like I've got a nice even coat there. It's time to glue it in place. So I'm just pressing down very hard and wiping the excess glue from the edges. Then I'll put it under weight and leave it over several nights. Once dry, after several days of thinking about it, grid or no grid, I decided I wanted a grid. So I marked out 1-inch squares across both sides because I plan on these pieces being reversible. If you're going to spend the time making a project like this, you want to get the most use out of it. Here you see the other side has already been marked. Looks good. Now it's time to mark out the pieces. At first I thought I'd go with some very thin ones, but I thought no, I wanted a little more playability, and I planned to stack these on each other, so I ended up making the piece 3 inches wide by the full length, and decided to make another one. Thought these would work very well as walls or long pathways, and I could stack other pieces on top of them to create even greater heights. Here I wanted some larger platforms. And a couple little column pieces. Perfect. Now I'm going to draw some different shapes using the same basic concepts on the 2-inch. I'm a big fan of Tetris, and I think it shows in a couple of these pieces' designs. But I thought some variation would be fun when you're using them in game. Looks like I'm thinking pretty hard about those last pieces, but I like them. Now time to turn on the hot wire cutter and get to work. I absolutely love my Proxxon hot wire cutter, and I think it inspired this build. I'm not even sure if I could pull this one off without it. You'd have to find a different way to cut foam this thick like this. Maybe with a hand cutter you could pull off something close, and maybe with a large knife. But for all of you home crafters that don't have one, I apologize. I just couldn't see this project being possible without it. So thank you to my family for getting it for me. I love it, and I love you. To make these cuts simpler on myself, I'm going to separate the 2 pieces in half, separating the 3-inch piece from the 2-inch piece, and that will make cutting out all the individual pieces much easier. Steady as she goes. Now it's time to cut my 2-inch pieces. You can see I'm testing the wire to make sure the temperature is just right, and then I'm going to get right into it. I'm taking my time, although I really don't need to. These cuts aren't super important. In fact, the very nature of the design allows for a nice, chaotic, wavy edge. So here's my first piece cut. Why don't you show it off to the camera? There you go. Looking good. Looking good. But a whole bunch more to do. So let's get to it and speed things up. This step actually ended up being a lot of fun, and just kept turning out these great looking pieces. I don't show it in the video, but I actually had a lot of fun with the refuse or the remaining offcuts, the thin little wavy bands. Um, I was so excited about them, I ended up running over to my wife and showing them off to her non-amusement. I'm in the final stretch of cutting. You can see I'm starting to cut out the smaller pieces of the 3-inch thick foam. I'm really happy with these, and I've only just started. So the excitement for this project continues to grow and grow and grow. And I hope you're excited too. It's going to be great. This next step is the actual carving of the cliffs. And as you can see from the table, I've actually got most of the pieces carved. I really wanted to get my technique down before I shared it with you. And I went through a lot of trials and tribulations on this. I'm going to share with you my experiences here and the technique I found most useful. As you can see, I've got some 3-inch pieces left, and I am taking my large knife and hacking into the sides to ultimately make the center slightly concave or convex. Which is it? I'm not sure. The center is sloping in so that it'll be slightly beveled if you were to pull back and look closely. As you can see, I'm making sure to keep my fingers out of harm's way. Accidents do happen. They happen to the best of us. And the knife's extremely sharp, so please be careful. Don't cut yourself like I did. Yes, that's right. A lot of literal blood, sweat, and tears went into this job. Please be careful. I can't emphasize that enough. And yeah, so I sped things up a little bit. You can see I'm sticking the knife in and then popping out pieces of foam to get a nice rough looking cut. And then once I've gone in and beveled those areas out to something I like, I take the smaller X-Acto knife and I do the same thing but on a much smaller scale. So I'm poking the blade into the foam and then lifting and tearing out chunks to create ridges in the cliffside. With these two different techniques employed on the pieces of foam, you end up with a very, well, I hope realistic looking bit of jagged rock and cliff. Something that works well both for cave and for mountain cliff. This scene does go on a little longer than some of the others, but this is probably the most important scene of the video, the carving of the cliffs. It really is important if you want these cliffs to look good, that you get a really nice carve on the edges. So I wanted to make sure you had a good view of my technique. I had originally had these videos moving at 100% speed. You'll see they're greatly sped up now just because it really does take a while, a long time for each individual piece. So when you're doing this technique, please just be careful, watch your fingers, don't cut yourself, and if you do, stop and clean the wound and get a band-aid and then press on, because we've got a craft. Once it's carved out, don't forget your tin foil. You're going to texture the tops and bottoms just like we've done in the past, and get in those edges too. All those little nooks and crannies. Any large piece of foam that looks like it's ready for some texture, let me tell you, it wants that texture, and the paint is only going to make that texture pop. So don't forget any bit. Get it all, and when I get done with this small piece, I'm going to have to get the rest of them. Alright, now it's time to flock our pieces with some craft sand. Again, I'm going to take that white PVA glue and spread it about the piece in a nice even coat. And once that's finished, I'm going to take my craft sand and sprinkle it along the surface to add a lot of depth and texture for painting. I'm only going to show you a couple of pieces being done, but rest assured that giant pile there all needs to be taken care of, and I will get to it. Remembering that these cliff tiles here are going to be double-sided, it's time to do the other side. Now the first side got a pretty heavy flock of sand, and I've decided to make that the grassy mountain part of the reversible tiles. So this side of the tile I'm going to put on a thin coat of PVA glue, and I'm going to flock them with sand as well, but I'm going to go much lighter. This is going to be the cave side of the tile. As you can see, I'm putting on the sand very sparsely, and that is to make it look more of a stone-like floor. So once I get done with this, I'm going to finish up with the rest. Now it's time to hit everything with that Black Magic Craft base coat, made famous by Black Magic Craft YouTube. It's 50% black acrylic paint and 50% matte Mod Podge, and this is going to protect and stiffen these pieces of foam. It's a must-do step when creating pieces that you plan on being handled very often. And let me tell you, this was a bit of a nightmare for these. All these cracks and crevices and crannies on these sides here, they really sucked this mixture up, and it took me hours to get all these pieces painted. I'm not going to show you that. You're welcome. I'm just going to show you a speeded up version of this one. But rest assured, I will get all of them done and show you a picture after they've all been completed. I actually have to do the three sides and top, and then I go back in to get the bottom. Here you can see a mini with them for scale. Boy, they're going to look great. The mini standing in front of a 3-inch, and I've got a 2-inch off to the side. I am very excited for this project and its finishing. Because hand painting them, the Mod Podge Black was such a nightmare, I opted to use a spray paint primer. Because I had protected them fully with the Mod Podge, I wasn't worried about the propellant in the cans melting the foam, and this worked like wonders. As you can see, here they are, based in a gray. With the gray primer done, it's time to paint. And I wanted these cliffs to be way more visually appealing than my standard stone, which is just grays. So I opted to try a stippling technique with a sponge. And here I am using a khaki, and I'm going to combine that with a reddish brown that I'm going to mix two colors to achieve. I'm going to use that bright wine red and a little bit of that dark umber. And I'm going to mix those two up to get my second color. I am very new to stippling. This is my first time ever trying the technique. I'd say made famous by one DM Scotty, another crafter here on YouTube that I highly recommend you check out. I love DM Scotty. At some point I almost give up. I'm just not quite sure if I'm liking the reds and the khaki. It's so out of my comfort zone, these colors, but I really want them to look great, so I'm trusting in the process, and I'm just going to finish painting them all up in a similar fashion. You can see with this second piece I've gotten a little more comfortable. I've got the red on one side of the sponge, the khaki on the other, and I'm just going back and forth covering the surface area with the two colors. And here they are finished. I wasn't happy with their look at this point. They were very red, and well, again, I gotta just trust in the process. So I pulled out my light granite gray, and I gave everything a nice dry brush, a nice heavy dry brush with the granite gray. And this is when I started to fall in love with these cliffs. You can see the granite gray really acts as a go-between between the two colors, the khaki and that red brown. It blends, it brings down the red brown just a touch, and with this third color added, man oh man, I'm really liking what I'm seeing. And I'm going to show you a quick time lapse of the painting of a couple, the dry brushing of a couple of these pieces, and then when we're done, I'm going to show you a photo of all the pieces after they've been dry brushed and laid out. You're going to like what you see, I think. You can see me looking over the piece and going back into areas I think need a little more gray. I just want to make sure that red isn't too vibrant and bright. I want it, but I don't want it screaming at anyone looking at it. And then I've pulled the piece back. I thought I was finished, but not quite. Just going to hit a few more areas and make sure those edges have a nice highlight as well. And here they all are together after that dry brush, and you can see the depth of color I'm starting to achieve in these cliffs and cave faces. Man oh man, I'm pumped. Let's continue and really make them look great. So Now it's time for the wash. Here I am admiring my own work, but I'm really getting pleased with these. So here I am applying a black wash. It's a homemade wash, a little bit of black ink, and mostly water and a little bit of soap. But the wife added a little pearlescent ink to this for this project, and it's going to add a bit of a glitter and a grit shine. I don't think the camera will pick it up, but in person it just really sells these as actual rock and mineral. Man, the effect is incredible. And if you've got an extra bottle to make yourself a special black wash, I highly recommend just a slight little bit of pearlescence. It really does up the look. So here I am finishing up this first one with the black wash. I will get to all of them, but I'm only going to show you this first one. So I do have a picture of all the pieces setting up to dry. There it is. Look at that black wash, just getting in all those nooks and crannies, all those pieces of sand and particulate that we put on the top. Look at how all that texture is jumping out at you. I love it. Of course, our final step for these cliffs is a nice highlight. So I've gone in with a vanilla here. I've loaded my brush with that vanilla and then wiped most of it off on the paper towel. And I'm just going in very lightly and hitting all those raised edges. The black wash always kind of dims and brings the colors down a little bit. And in this way, with a nice highlight, you can bring back all those edges and makes all that carving, all that intense sculpting we did at the start. This is where it really pays off when you go back in and you highlight it with this nice creamy vanilla color. I'm just really getting in there, making sure I get all the edges. In fact, I thought I saw a few that I missed. There we go, looking good. Show it off. There's the difference between the two. With the cave and cliff sides painted, it's time to get to work on the last side, the field and mountain side. And like my tree bases, I'm going to start with a base of Mississippi mud. I'm just going to be real careful as I paint the Mississippi mud, not to go over the edges. I really want those the cliff walls to shine. I put so much work and have such a depth of color to them. I'd rather not overpaint on this step. So I'm just going to be real careful and get right up to the edges. After doing the painting the sides and the other bottom or top, as it were, that step went very quickly, which was awesome, because at this point I was chomping at the bit to get these done. So now with the Mississippi mud dried, I'm going to go back in with a honey brown. You can see I load that brush up and then I wipe most of it off on the paper towel. And I just go back in with a nice easy dry brush so I can pick up all the sand and particulate I glued down earlier. and it's going to add a great texture. Most of this texture will be covered up by the grass flocking in the later steps, but you know, I like to know that it's there, and I think it adds a nice deeper look, even with the grass flocking on top. Now back to one of my most favorite of steps, flocking. Look at this intimate close camera angle we've got here. Boy, I like it. It's almost like I know what I'm doing. So much like I did with the sand, I'm going to cover the surface in a thin layer of PVA glue, making sure I get good coverage. Once I'm happy with the coverage I've got, I'm going to sprinkle some of that grass flocking I've got. And well, I took that great camera angle and I ruined it by putting my big old arm in the way. But what you can't see is I'm gently tapping the canister over the glued surface. And then once that's complete, I'm tapping off the excess of the flocking. And where it's a little sparse, I'm pinching up some of that overflock and just kind of putting it back down, tamping it back in place. Boy, that looks great. And I'm going to show you a shot of all of the pieces flocked, sitting together happily. Man, don't they look fantastic. I absolutely cannot wait to play with these. My players are going to flip. These are going to change everything forever. Well, the problem with flocking is it doesn't want to stick down. So, oh, look at me showing off the piece. Both sides, aren't they looking great? But the real purpose of this here segment is to put a second coat of glue down on that flocking, because you don't want that green flocking to end up being everywhere. So again, I'm going to create a mixture, 50% white glue and 50% water. I'm going to give that a really good mix, and then I'm going to go back in and I'm going to glue all this flocking down. And I think I'll just be quiet here and we can enjoy the gorgeous close-up view of this sexy terrain being finished. When the weather gets better, I will take these pieces out and I will hit them with a spray sealer to keep fingerprints from rubbing the glue off. But until then, they are finished, and I am going to show you them all set up and looking great. So, man, another 30-minute long video. I appreciate you sticking around to the end. I really do, but I think it was worth it, especially for this project. So I'm going to show you some great setups here with the pieces. Look at this. I've got a little ambush in the valley, an orc leading a band of goblins against our heroes. And boy, oh boy, look at all that elevation. That's fantastic. Here we have the same setup, but you can see just how easy it is to change the face of the battlefield. Here I am adding a small cliff that could be used also as a column to break up a large area or room. We see our dwarven hero Lemore is jumping into action to take out those goblins at the ballista. Man, I love it. But how about that reverse side? let's check that out. Here we have a cave setup. So in this first set they were as boundaries. Here they are as actual surfaces to walk on. And you can see that grid. I'm really happy with that grid. I'm glad I made the decision. It didn't work so well with the grass flock. You can't see it at all, but it really comes through nice and gentle with these cave pieces. I'm pleased. So here our heroes are exploring the cave. Old Ben moves forward to scout ahead for his friends. I'm going to end with some stills. I want to thank you for watching this video, and please like and subscribe and comment and craft on. Have a great day. Thought I was done, but I wasn't. I've got one more setup for you here. Looks like our band of heroes is about to confront some cultists. They've abducted the merchant's wife and they're about to sacrifice her to their dark gods. Get in there, heroes, and save her. And for the rest of us, happy playing and craft on.